Okay. Good evening or hello everybody, depending on where you are. It might be morning for you. Welcome to the Free PGC webinar for this month. And before we start, I'll say a few words about the Free PGC, which is the Free Principle Global Community. And the aim of the Free PGC is to spread the word about the Free Principle worldwide. So before I introduce our guest speaker today, I'd like just to remind you, if you want to ask questions and you're watching on the Google Plus page, you'll be able to do so by using the Q&A facility. So just type your question, and when Steve opens for question, I will read your question and he will answer them. So before we start, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, which I'm delighted to welcome. It's Steve Adair. So Steve Adair is an international speaker, trainer, free principle-based practitioner, and he's the co-director of the Free P Life and Soul. From an early age, he has been fascinated by how people think and behave. This, blended with his passion for helping others, has guided Steve to work within the human potential development field since 1991. He has studied and practiced as a coach, trainer, mentor, and peer educator, and is also a qualified psychotherapeutic counselor. Following attending a free principle school on Salt Spring Island in late 2011, Steve realized profound insight and experienced personal transformation, and has since dedicated his professional life to sharing the true nature of the free principle. Steve was a participant on the inaugural fellowship training with Elsie Spittle and Chip Chipman, and he has facilitated free principle-based programs with individuals and groups, privately and within community-based programs. These programs have benefited people who have experienced mental illness, homelessness, domestic violence, as well as single parents and ex-offenders. He has also presented at the NLF conference in London and the Free PGC conference, which happened a few weeks ago, not that long ago. So I'm really delighted to welcome Steve, and I think we're in for a treat. To you, Steve.
Thank you, Corinne. That's a very nice welcome. It's always interesting to receive back what you've actually put out as far as your bio or so on. So thank you so much for reading that out. So welcome everyone. It's my great pleasure to be able to spend this next hour with you. And the topic that I decided, it was interesting speaking to Corinne before, that I went with the being here now, awakening in the moment. And the reason why I went with that understanding is because since I've uncovered the smallness of the three principles, then I've realized that the principles give us the gift to truly be awakened like never before, moment to moment, which really allow us to become truly present to our true nature, not the reality that we've made up. And what I want to do is through this hour is actually start exploring that a little bit more for you and what I mean by that. And as Karine had said, if there's any questions, by all means, please ask. I'd be delighted for any questions to come through, or if you have any comments that you just want to share, then we would love to hear that too. I wanted to share with you, to start off, what I call my awakening moment of my very first insight to my true nature. And the reason why I feel that's important is that before I had come into this understanding of the principles, then I had already had a practice where I had been working as a coach, where I'd been working as a therapeutic counselor, and I was very full with things in my life. There was so much going on that anything else coming along was just information that I didn't need. So when my partner and business partner Tony would say to me that, oh, there's this three principles you'd be really interested in because it has kind of things that you've talked about through the years, I was kind of, no, stop, I'm just not interested in this. And the more that he would speak about it, then the more I actually get stuck in thought. I became quite, dare I say, obnoxious. So the more that he would speak, then the more that I would realize that what was going on was something that didn't feel right for me. I was blaming it on Tony, but it was something that wasn't feeling right for me. And I didn't like that. So it kind of got me in thought a little bit more. Long story short, Tony had asked me once upon a time would I like to go out to Canada. I know it's a place that I've always wanted to go. Then it was to the school on Saltspring Island, which was with Chip and Elsie. And I decided that what I would do is go along and get out a free jail card by saying if I didn't like the first evening, I don't have to go to the rest, right? And that's what we had set up, that I didn't have to go to anymore. And I go along to the first night, and I really enjoyed the laughter. I really enjoyed the space. But when I came away from it, went back to the hotel room, I was back in personal thinking, and I was beginning to pick faults in that as well. So I said I'd go along the next morning, and that this was the morning that I had set up by the afternoon, and that would be it. I'd be free. I could go and explore the island. But there was something that I actually heard which really changed my life in such a profound way. That's why I'm actually sat here today. And I don't know to this day what I heard Elsie say. Elsie and Chip were on the stage and they were talking. And I don't know to this day what I heard. But I was moved in such a way that once they had stopped for a break, that I found myself standing up and walking towards the actual stage. And I thought I was just going to say something like, Elsie, oh, that was really great. But what came out of my mouth in such a fast, clear way was, Elsie, I haven't got a clue what you've just said, but I've just come home. Now, in that moment, what I recognized was that there was a feeling inside of me that I had felt in childhood, but not in the way that I was experiencing it in that moment. And in that moment, what I was aware of all personal thinking dropped. And as I stood there, and Elsie leant forward and says, well, that's lovely, my dear. And then I turned around, and as I turned around and looked out to the rest of the group who was still there, I didn't see their faces as such, but I felt the most indescribable feeling of love wave through from me to them and them to me. Even though they were sitting in their groups, I realized in that moment our true nature and our personal thinking drops, and we're left with the simplicity and the neutrality of who we truly are. Now, I had glimpses of that through the work that I had done before, but never in the way, because before I could say, well, that's because they gave me this exercise, they did that exercise, but none of that was said. They were talking about Sid's work, they were talking about how they'd been touched, but something inside of me awakened. And it was that thing that when I'd gone back to my chair and Tony says to me, what did you say to Elsie? I was back in personal thinking. And I said, I don't know, I'll tell you later. And we walked back out into the car park, and I'd say to Tony, you know, I haven't got a clue what just happened there, but I'm going to be sharing this for the rest of my life. And in that moment of what I say coming home, remembering that I was someone who wasn't interested in knowing about the principles before, I was someone who wouldn't even look at Sydney Banks' work. I wouldn't look at Elsie's stuff. I didn't want any information. And then when I hear that this feeling of coming home is something that's been spoken about before, that really got me curious. And I realized that I've always been a searcher. And all my friends and all my colleagues that I've had around me for many moons, we've always been a searcher. But I knew in that moment that everyone's searching, when they understand their true nature, can stop. The moment that we start looking outside of ourselves to be able to find the solutions or answers to what we perceive is going wrong, it's only allowing ourselves to really be in our intellect. And I realized that the feeling that I had was the feeling of my true nature. But it wasn't just mine. It was the connection that we have. The truth of who we are. And from that, I did go along the rest of the days, and I enjoyed every single second, and I still don't know to this day what they were saying. And that's what really amazed me, that how can you go along and listen to something, have the time of your life, but not know what they're saying? And that was the thing that really started getting me curious. Because since 1991, being a searcher, I've learned the psychotherapeutic, the soul coaching, the different trainings that I've done. And what I've recognized was that it was to help me to be a better therapist, to help me to be a better person. And as much as a lot of them were great, what I recognized was that I had the belief that something within me was broken. Something needed to be fixed. I needed to be better than what I was. In that moment of awakening, that dropped. I saw in that moment that behind our personal thinking, there is a perfection that it's been guiding us since the moment we've come to this earth. And there is nothing that we can do to get away from it. Even though we can get into personal thinking and personal thought, it's still there guiding, supporting. It has our back. And in that place, what I saw was that when we start learning things like concepts, beliefs, ideas, which makes up society, what I was doing innocently as a therapist was beginning to look at trying to get someone who'd fallen asleep psychologically to awaken, but bringing the horror alive along with it, bringing the past along with it, and innocently thinking that was the best thing to do. But here's the thing, that what I see is that when we get into personal thinking, we numb our senses. We only see life in black and white. But when we're awake to our true nature, our spiritual intelligence, we're in high definition. We have surround sound. It's a completely different world, yet it's the world that brings us alive. When we're coming awake in that way, concepts and beliefs don't belong there. Our nature, the formless energy behind life, doesn't know things like anxiety, animosity, fear. So why would you get someone to look through the catalogue of what they believe went wrong or what is wrong? That's a misunderstanding of how we work with one another. The real understanding that I found was understanding our nature, understanding our truth. And what that did was allow me to be in a place of gratitude in that moment, without having to worry about what I'd done in the past, without having to worry about what was even going to happen in the afternoon. And in that moment of gratitude, what I began to see was that I dropped the attitude of having to be this, having to be that, and brought myself back to myself. When what I've been recognizing, that thinking that all these things of what I needed to do, or as a society where we get lost in thinking what we need to learn, was that in the principles there is nothing to learn. It's the unlearning of our concepts, our beliefs, our ideas, or the A to Z of what to do to make someone better. It's the realization or the understanding that inside every single person is everything that they need to know about themselves. And that when we come from our understanding of knowing that the health is there and listening for the health, there is an energy, there is a truth behind them that awakes them in the same way it awoke me in that moment. So what I'm talking about is just not unique to me, it's universal. It's a divine understanding where no concept in this world will hold the truth. So if we look at that no concept holds the truth, what does? For me, the spiritual intelligence is a familiar feeling for everyone. I know that the listeners would have heard this many a time before through their life, but maybe not in the way they thought. Because you see, intelligence can be a small whisper. It can be anything from really having a strong feeling, not in a feeling as in I'm feeling tickety-boo, life is feeling grand, but there is a knowing. And in this knowing, there is a neutrality that can move us from stillness to slowing us down to being centered. Or it can make us so assertive in the present moment to move forward with the things that maybe we've been fearful of. And in this intelligence, we have the wisdom of the ages. We have the wisdom that allows nature to change in the way that she does. We have the wisdom to recognize without us having to do anything, the sun will rise and set every single day. The oceans will ebb and flow in and out without us having to do anything about it. So when you look at what this intelligence can create, then how we shut ourselves down in our small world, when we begin to look what really we are made up of, and the harmonics that's within the universe, really how we're showing up is so small. Psychologically, we've got into a place of being so small that we scare ourselves. And it's in this moment that we begin to see the nature, the true nature of what Sydney Banks uncovered. That there is nothing to learn, you're perfect as you are. And in that perfection, you have the same wisdom. It ebbs and flows the oceans. It brings the sun up. It brings the sun down. It turns the world around. Everything is within. Now, of course, it's not within us and right inside us. It's just a metaphor that we say. But all we have to do is look around us to see what makes us up. The fact that we can sit here and listen and know that our heart is beating without having to bring any thought to it. We are designed in such a way that any fast-paced overthinking can be dropped when we recognize the simplicity of any time that we have an anxious feeling or a fearful feeling, then we're just thought in action. We're scaring ourselves. We've put on a movie, and that movie is just playing because we're believing it. And the more that we notice that, what it begins to do is bring us space. And that space is where wisdom can speak, where wisdom comes from, where wisdom has the ability to bring you into the moment, where we begin to see that what the principles really guide us to is how to be of service to ourselves. I know there is so many people in all professions who really want to help one another to be the best that they can. But what I've seen is that the more that I recognize that I am what I seek, and so is everyone, it brings us on a level that there is no separation, there is no difference. We're people helping people. Or there was a wonderful saying that I had heard that Sid had said that we simply go around the world tapping people on the shoulder and waking them up. To me, there's the nature of the principles. Whether before we get lost in, well, I can help you, we can do this and we can do that, I see that in the moment, the only person that can bring me awake is myself. My coming home is recognizing that really we're always coming from a place called home. And home for you is whatever you wish it to be. But for me, it simply lets us know that wisdom resides there. And wisdom is before the fact, before any personal thinking has come into action. And that can only be from the intellect. But when we look at that we are set in a way to have wisdom divinely guiding us in every single moment, and that when original thought comes to us, it's fresh, it has no personal identity. It's up to us in that moment what we choose. That's incredible. That there is an intelligence guiding things that we will truly never understand, but yet we see it happening. And we are that. That's our truth. We can see that it has the ability to simply let us know that through the gift of thought, nothing would make sense in our world. But yet, with our ego identity, we take it and use it against ourselves innocently. And then when we say that that's all we're doing, it really is all we're doing. We don't have to understand the who, the what's, the whys, and the wheres we're doing it. That's the old paradigm. Awakening the past is not the way of self-realization. It's the way of conditioning ourselves into all that we think we know. But as what I said before, the principles to me is the unlearning of who we've told ourselves that we are. And how we know the difference is really by the feeling. And I simply see it that if we are in a feeling of uncertainty, we're in thought, personal thought. And it means that we've gone into a thought storm and we believe in it. But if we have a feeling of surety, even though we don't really know what's going to happen, even though that life might be going a certain way, but we just have a feeling that it might go somewhere different and we want to follow that, there's wisdom beginning to give us the little nudges. And I personally, and Tony, since we've actually started the 3 principles with life and soul, that's how we've led our whole work to do with the principles. We've gone with this feeling, because in that feeling of being here right now, we don't have the fearful thinking of, oh yeah, but what happens if this goes wrong? What happens if that goes wrong? We make sure that we check in with ourselves. And then as soon as something doesn't feel right, then we're aware of its personal thought in action, or whether it's really wisdom allowing us to explore something a little bit more. And we constantly do that. Now what that allows us to do is show up in life more clearly. For me, the simplicity of the principles is that's what it really is not to understand what our thinking does and where it takes us and what we need to. It's simply showing us that we are thinkers. Full stop. And when we recognize that we are the thinker, which creates our feeling, full stop, then what it allows us to do is to be more aware of the natural slowing down. Because we weren't meant to be fast-paced, running around, robotic thinking in a way that we can find ourselves at times. That wasn't how we were designed. But yet we can get to a point that there is a humour when we catch ourselves doing it. Because part of our human nature is we do have an intellect. And what I'm not saying here is that it's wrong when we do it, but what I'm saying is that if you have a feeling it's not serving you, then you know where you are. You're in personal thinking. For me, what I've noticed is that there is such a presence within the slowing down. There is a silence of slowing down. And in that slowing down, there is a comfort of knowing that all is well. And that when we look through our lives, we can see that it's always been so. Even though at moments it didn't look like it. But I know I'm not the only one, but I had this realization that when I thought life was horrible, life was out to get me at times, that there was no one out to get me more than what I was to get myself. And I know that that's true for many people. that when they see that mind concept or belief of not being good enough or needing to do more, that when they see that it's thinking, doing what it's done, because we've programmed ourselves. No one can make us think or feel or behave in the way that we do but us. And for me, the beautiful thing of this is recognizing that it's thought and our thinking. It does it. Now, I know what I can do when I get stuck in my thinking, but I also know the other side of when I'm not. And both that I can see now in such a neutrality that I can still have thoughts of anxious without becoming the anxiousness, unsure without becoming the uncertainty. And again, that gift is for everyone. The three principles are bringing us the gift of life, are bringing us the gift of gratitude, service to ourselves, service to others, being in the moment without personal thinking, and knowing that I'm doing great. In this moment, this is all I know, and it's good enough for me. That really does awaken us to our true source, to our fountain of knowledge, of no concepts, no ideas, but yet a world of aliveness and surety. I'm just wondering at this moment, Karina, is there any questions or any comments come through?
No, not yet. I'm just going to remind people that if you want to ask question or comment, you can use the Q&A feature on the Google Plus page that you should have on the left-hand side normally. If you move your mouse, you should see it on the left-hand side. But I believe it's, people have a nice place to know.
Good.
Are you happy to carry on?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. I'll let you know if you have any questions. Okay?
You know, it's a beautiful thing when we allow ourselves, because as I was speaking to Corinne before I came on, I really want to be in the moment when I'm sharing. From years ago, being a trainer and having to in 5 minutes bring this part of the training alive, 15 minutes on that part, 20 minutes on that part. And the gift of allowing ourselves to really just turn up in the moment and just see what happens. Just really see what comes alive in that moment without having any place to get to. But what does come to mind is I'm delighted at the moment to be back in my homeland of Scotland. And I was 50 this year, and the reason why I share this is that I want to give a little bit of a story of a thought that I really saw how I could cripple myself in my thinking innocently. And it's a little bit of a story that I'll give a little bit of a backdrop just to let you know how powerful I'd carried this understanding or misunderstanding with me. When just before I was 25, my dad had died suddenly, and when the family came to pay respects to mum and I hadn't seen some of my dad's aunts for many a moon, and repeatedly a lot of them were saying, Oh gosh, Stephen's so like his dad, he's so like his dad. And one particular night, there was one aunt and she kept on saying it. And somewhere along the line, I don't recall when, but I put two and two together and came up with five. And my five told me that because my dad was 50 when he died, and I was so like my dad, the same thing was going to happen to me. Now, I stood in the truth of that. I had looked at it through all of my trainings, but I still couldn't get rid of this horror of a thought. The anxiousness, at times the depression I felt. When I awoke in that moment in Salt Spring, I awoke to the moment last year of how I created the belief of when I turned 50. Now, I'd carried that for 24 years. I'd been through different therapies. When I was doing my training, you have to have therapy with it. And then one day I was simply sitting. I don't remember what I was thinking, but the realization flowered. And innocently I saw how I'd made up the story and what would happen to me. And in that moment I saw that I'd get into such habitual thinking that I chased it, I filed it into my deep-rooted thinking, I pulled it out, cleaned it, dusted it, added some more things onto it, refiled it again, and then I pressed play, became all the anxiousness of it, added a little bit more onto it. But I recognized that I also became fearful of my own thinking. Now, in that realization, in that awakening that I had created that understanding, what really tickled me and chuffed me was that I didn't get into, oh my goodness, how I've wasted all those, how could I do that? I giggled, I laughed when I saw what I'd done. Now that really amazed me because for 24 years I lived in fear of it. And then when I had the insight into my nature of thought, I laughed. I was free. I was no longer a prisoner of my old habitual thinking. Now there is a wonderful saying that I heard, and at the moment I heard it, I liked it, but I didn't really know what it made sense to me. But it was George Pransky who says it, and it's all boats ride with the same time. And I thought I like that, but I didn't know why. And what I recognized in that moment, the reason why I liked it, was that because in my old style thinking, that's one realization, right? Where else have I felt that way? Where else have I felt that way? And gone into the past and maybe gone over it for months, maybe years, to try to understand why I had that thinking. I knew where it originated from, but I didn't know which parts that came up as the answer 5. But I didn't have to do that. And I recognized it was one of the times Tony had said to me, are you okay? There was something that had happened. He says, are you okay? And I said, yeah. And he says, you'd have got upset by that before. No, I wouldn't have. And I genuinely had no idea what he was talking about. Why would I get upset about that kind of thing? And I realized that I had so much insecurity and fear locked into that old habitual thinking, and that was gone. And it was gone because wisdom had brought the light to it. And it let me see that all I was doing was believing the illusion that I created. That any thought, personal thinking that we have is the illusion, it's not real. The ego we were not born with. It's self-identification. It's something that we created ourselves. So we can create something that can do that. Imagine what we can do and become when we create from the intelligence and original thought. That's what I ask people, of anything out of this, to get curious about. Not why you do what you do with your thinking, but how you can do it, where it comes from in the first place. What is really this intelligence for me? What does it mean to me? Some people call it God, some people call it Buddha, some people call it, but yet it's a feeling of love. It's a feeling of understanding that nothing in the past is real. Even the wonderful good times that we have are yet but memories of love from times gone past that serve us more rightly in this present moment. But it's still with the gift of original thought, even they're the past. So even trying to go back to remembering, oh yeah, if I just think this happy thought, we try to bring up all the times that we were happy. Now, as soon as we start asking why or how does this happen to me, the ego, believing it's the only server that we have, will go and tell us why we're feeling down, why we're feeling upset, but not just about this incident, about all the other filing cabinet systems that it's got. So it's never really about what we think it is in that moment, it's about everything else we've attached to it. That seems like hard work. To start going through the filing cabinet of our past is unnecessary, I see. The more that I understand, or I'm a student of the principles. Because in that moment of 24 years, just like that was gone. That really let me know that when we wake up to our true nature of our reality, we simply see the illusion. We see the illusion of concepts. We see that if we don't have thought coming alive, nothing exists. We see that without consciousness, we wouldn't know how we're feeling. We wouldn't know how to come from a place of purity. And we see that mind allows all this to come alive. All this to bring us inspiration in the moment. And I say again, it's nothing new. I remember the first time when I was sitting, and I used to go to visit one of my cousins, and I remember being on my bike, and it was a very steep hill. But the devil in me loved going down there without using my brakes. I never crashed into the wall at the bottom. I knew I was going to be okay. And when I glimpse back in my life and I see those moments that I used to think was, well, that wasn't a good time in my life, I made that up. It was a wonderful time. Some of the circumstances or some of the things that I've been through would be perceived in the intellect thinking as not being good. But I see that as being a choice now. I don't see things as being good or bad. I see things as being personal thinking or not personal thinking. I just see things as being that I'm believing my lower level of consciousness. That could be because I'm tired, that could be because I'm hungry, or it could just be that I'm having that kind of thought. I realize how we take ourselves so seriously, and how that we will argue our point of view right to the end, that the illusion that we're thinking is real. But we don't take the ego with us. We don't take this body with us. But yet the intelligence that where we come from is where we will go back to. There is never any separation. It's impossible. That the same love and source that brings everything around us alive is always alive and kicking within us. And the more that we start looking towards that for answers, it changes us as a person, but even on how we work with people, our relationships become healthier. Because we don't see things like competition. We can see that where people are becoming lost in their illusion. We can see that we are really hurting people if we keep them in the old primordial exercises and things to do and where to go and how to make their life better. We can see that they really know their answers. They may be lost in thought. They may be lost in a storm of thinking. They may have reached out in innocence and believing that drugs or alcohol or a mental illness allows them to escape from the pain that they've been feeling. But yet behind all that is the same wisdom, still bringing them alive, still beating the heart, still allowing the flow of neutrality to be there to wake up in a moment, just like I did after 24 years. We can wake up in any moment and be truly present. So when we start looking at that and how we're showing up in life, it really gets exciting when we really don't have a clue what's going to happen next. It really does bring us into a place of realizing that every experience is like the very first time we've experienced it. And if that means that it's the very first time we've experienced it, there is no past available in there. There is no future available in there. There is just that moment. And it's not a moment of being asleep. It's not a moment of dumbing down our senses. It's the opposite. It's like the awakening of a flower. You can watch I remember looking at I'm fascinated by any plant as it opens in the summer, but really by the roses, on how it seems so closed, tight and a bud. And our life can feel that way. Then all of a sudden, it's open for the world to see. That's like us, opening and closing, in and out of consciousness, personal, impersonal, in and out. And we see that that's our neutrality. We see that that's how we are, without judging, without having to sidestep, without having to escape, without having to, and we just drop behind the innocent thinking of lostness. And we rest for a while. And that while could simply be a split second. But yet in the formlessness there is no time. So it can open our heart up in such a way that the concept of time doesn't come into it. It's like a soothing balm. Now these are words that I'm bringing for me to try to explain a little bit of what I feel the spiritual intelligence is. But the more exciting thing is when you get to understand it for yourself, because how I feel it is not exactly how you feel it. And this is where it gets exciting. The A to Z of what to do doesn't belong in the spiritual intelligence. But yet the divine guidance of who you were born to be is. You don't have to go looking for happiness within that, because you were born happy. You don't need to look of self-value in that place, because you're valued. You don't have to go looking for acceptance. In that place, you're accepted. So what I'm gently pointing to is any of those words that you want to use yourself. It's simply looking at the misunderstanding or believing that we think having a better car, better job, or a healthy relationship is the misunderstanding that anything outside of us defines who we are. Our well-being is not dependent on anything outside of us. Inside of us is the riches. That it's not saying that it's wrong to want those things. But what I find is with myself, and the more I speak with people around the principles, pardon me, understanding, is that in this easiness of life it seems to come around. Life gets simpler. We understand that the big house would be nice, but we don't need it. Because they don't really make us happy. And we simply see that we are perfect exactly as we are. We simply see the nature of the principles is not something that we need to learn, but it's something that we have always been. The gift for me by Sydney Banks is to simply allow us to know that the truth, the love, and the heart of who we are is always with us moment to moment. Heartbeat, heartbeat. And it changes from one moment to the next. And that the same thinking it took us into a thought storm will not be the thinking it takes us out. But original thought will move us in such a way, as wisdom guides us, we can move from one thing and the next minute be in a completely different direction. And I've seen this year for sure that what really happens is that when that the feeling of wisdom can really move us in such a clear way, and we think, right, this is where it's going. But it's not about putting our attachment, it's staying with the feeling and what the feeling is telling us. And bit by bit, the more we listen to the moment, the feeling becomes clearer. And the more that we become clearer, we just know, again I say that all is well. And that all is well is what moves us through life with grace and ease. And in that moment, when things begin to happen, it might mean that we pop back into thought just to deal with things very quickly, but we know that behind us, all is well. And it's that wellness that the principles point to. The innate health of who we are, free from any psychological disharmony, upset, or whatever word you want to bring to it. We are free from any limited thinking. And the world of possibilities is available in every moment. So I'm just wondering, any more questions?
We have one question and one comment. So I'll start with the question.
Sure.
You probably already said a few things about it, but you might want to add something. So Pinky asks, can you talk about how the understanding of the three principles is affecting your quality of life?
Wow. Yeah. You know, this is something that how it's changed the quality of my life is we haven't got enough time to actually, for me to share on that, because I really see me completely different now. I really see where I was out to get myself, and I don't do that anymore. Or when I do, I see myself doing it, and it changes quicker. So I was someone who, through to life experiences, would always hold a little bit of myself back. Didn't always trust. And now that I know that what I was doing was holding myself back, and what I wasn't trusting is who my true nature is. So it's changed my life profoundly. It's changed my life from someone who was a continual seeker to no longer doing that. There was thousands of books that Tony and I had in a library, and they're gone. Because I recognize that when I read a book, it's brilliant to read a book, but it's someone else's thoughts, it's someone else's ideas. My true nature allows me to be in the moment, gives me what I need to be in the moment. And the only book that I go to, and I don't read them the whole way through now, I pick up and read a page or two, is Sydney Banks. Because in that I find the simplicity that I believed I had to find before, through reading all the other books. So for me, I've recognized that life doesn't always have to be chasing my own tail. I don't have to be a better person. I don't have to always get things right. I don't have to set the bar so high that there's no way I'd ever reach it. I don't have to play the game of life in the way that I've played it. And I see this true for everyone, because it's the illusion. And I see that it's the illusion now. When the thought storm comes, my fight or flight might kick in, and then I catch it. But the greatest gift that how my life has changed, is that when I said a little bit earlier on that I can have an anxious thought, but not, and the feeling can come up, but I don't have to become it. And when I don't become it, it passes so quickly. That's how it's changed my life profoundly, that I like how I show up, warts and all. So I hope that's answered Pinky's question for her.
I like to read the comment now, Steve.
Sure.
So it's from Arlene, and she said, "The inner whisper of wisdom is always there. Thank you for talking about the silence we need. In the midst of turmoil recently, all I heard was to quieten my mind. What came back with the silence was ultimate love." Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, that's beautiful. See, this is the beauty of this. I mean, to be able to hear that back, that when you just sit and you don't have a clue really where you're going to go, but then someone can have their own realization like that. That's what I love about this. And it reminds me there again of how there is no separation. That when we truly speak from the heart of the principles, then people awaken to they become present in their moment. And they awaken to their nature in that moment. Not because of what I've said, but because of what they've heard inside of themselves. And I truly love that. So thank you so much for sharing that. I love that.
We don't have any. Everybody must be in a nice place. We don't have anything else to see. Would you like to conclude?
Yeah, I would. So I would just like to thank everyone for listening to this. And if there's any questions or any comments that you would like to, please, by all means, share it. And one of the ways you can do that is send to my email, which is steve@3plifesoul.co.uk. You can also have a look at the website of the wonderful things that Tony and I are up to. We've been making a lot of changes, mind-based changes, especially this year. And you can check our website, which is www.3plifesoul.co.uk. We're on Facebook, 3 Principles with Life and Soul. And we're also on Twitter, @LifeSoul2. So I would love to hear from people on anything that they've heard from this webinar, because that's where the true magic happens. When people begin to hear from just listening to someone, when they take that moment to allow their world of possibilities to become present in this moment, and knowing that this space of wisdom creates anything beyond what their self-perceived illusion ever will. So I just want to say thank you again, and thank you so much, Karine, for being a wonderful host. It's been wonderful looking at your smiling face as we've gone along. And I just want to wish everyone to have a truly heartfelt life filled with grace, love, and gratitude. So from me, goodbye.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for a wonderful webinar. And goodbye from me too. And hope you'll join us next month. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.